I'm Courtney Muller. I'm the Chief Corporate Development Officer of Connectiv. I'm also president of Manifest, which is one of the shows we currently are running.
Oh, it's me. Yes,
Yes,
hi. I did this morning. I'll say it again if you weren't here. Hi, Jay Weintraub. I'm the CEO of Connectiv, and the pleasure to get to work with Courtney.
Right back at you, Jay. Okay, so before we get started, I want to give a little background on Connectiv. As you can see, over the past 11 years, Connectiv has built and exited 4 events. I was pretty close to 2 of those exits, MAU Vegas and InsurTech Connect, because I was in charge of M&A for Clarion Events at the time of those acquisitions. So a couple things I want to say about Jay's events. I spoke with Heather Farley.
Our events.
I'm sorry.
Our events.
Our events. I spoke with Heather Farley last week. She is the newly anointed CEO of Access Intelligence, and I wanted to ask her about LeadsCon, because LeadsCon was divested to them 11 years ago. And she told me that LeadsCon has been growing from the moment they acquired it. It has grown every single year. They had a couple wonky years during the pandemic, obviously, but just a couple of weeks ago, they just produced their largest LeadsCon ever. So hats off to you, Jay. That was your first event. One of the other events that we exited was InsurTech Connect to Clarion in 2019. And I'm so proud to say the Clarion team has done a great job with it since they've completely taken it over. And InsurTech Connect is now the largest revenue-producing event at Clarion North America. No small feat. It is now larger than the Fire Department Instructors Conference, which was always the biggest event at Clarion North America. In addition to that, it has become an international event. There is an event in Europe, there's one in Asia, and there's also an event representing the Latin American market. So ITC, with a little help from Jay and a lot of help from Clarion, has also become a global brand. Very, very proud of that. Transform, their new owners, were gifted 40% revenue growth in the first year after they acquired it.
48, it turns out.
Oh, sorry, 48%. So not only do we create and build events ourselves, but we build events that are lasting, that are enduring, and that will keep growing once they're no longer in our hands. Our current portfolio of events, we have 3 events right now. Blueprint is focused on real estate technology. Manifest is supply chain and logistics technology, and Medicarians is senior health and wealth. Okay, so to kick things off, Jay, could you share how you ended up in the events industry and why?
I got to tell you, it's the worst time to need to cough. I almost like the Zoom, so you've got the quick keys on the mute. You can do it real fast. And then, okay. Well, I mean, it's been, I sort of have 2 distinct memories of how I got into this space. And, one of them was there was an event called, AdTech. And I was invited by a friend, this was the early 2000s, to go speak. And it was probably the coolest experience I'd had. Walk around there and said, this is great, I want to speak again. And I go to fill out the form, and they have all these check boxes of like, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to talk about? And the one thing I knew was not on the checkbox. And I was like, this is weird. Like, I thought this is, borrowing from Nora, I said, I thought this is where my people were, and it wasn't. And so I walked around to some of the exhibitors that I knew as friends and said, like, you're here at the show, but does it really, like, is this you? And, I probably didn't say it quite that way. And the answer was, no, like, it's the only thing we have, though. And then, it was about a year later, a company did its own client summit, and the client summit probably had about 80 people at it, and they invited me to attend, and, that's when it was like, holy cow, if this one company can get 80 people, I mean, surely should be an industry event. And so I never set out to sort of be an entrepreneur per se, but it was the first time where I really wanted to fail and try. Well, I didn't want to fail. I should rephrase that, actually. It was the first time I would be happy to try and fail than just not, sort of try. And so that was really it. And then as you, so nicely summarized for us, we started in earnest in 2008.
Yep, and this is typical. I find entrepreneurs who go into the event business because they think the event that they want doesn't exist. And that's basically what happened with Jay. So why do you call our company a studio?
Well, I mean, it begins probably, the origins are, now almost 9 years, sort of old. So we had just sold our first event and, had just put on a very small event for like, we didn't really know what we were doing. And it's a bad way to say it, but you're trying to figure the world out. And so the thought was, we have to do something and we don't want to be a one-hit wonder. So can we do an event? And if we think about the origin of the event, the first event was people I knew, people I was friends with, people that the community I knew, and it's great. That's a great way to start an event. It's a terrible way to start a second event if you've sold the first event and have a non-compete. So that was like, what do we do? So we had this event, and people said really nice things about it. But the problem was it was 1/10 of the size of the original event that we had just sold. And frankly, kind of forgot how hard it was to do what we do. And I mean, all of us. We sort of forgot. We took it for granted. And that's when decided, well, what do we want to be? What do we want to do? And we said, we don't want to just be in the show business. We don't want to create shows. We want to create, hits. And it's like, what is a hit? And, Rick actually just said this, right? It is a brand. It is an enduring brand. And so, and you said it too, like our job today is pretty simple. It is create an enduring brand. And if this brand doesn't impact for the better a community, we've failed. If these brands do not, help connections, if they don't help people for the best, like we've sort of failed. It's what Dave said earlier about being a catalyst. And so that for us is, sort of like why the studio.
Right. And why do you select the verticals you select?
Why do we select the verticals? I would like, to say, the first show we talked about was pretty much easy. Didn't even know that we were in the show business. Thought for probably 5 years. I remember being invited to CISO, and I sort of said, that sounds like the dumbest thing ever. Why would anyone go to a show for show people? Clearly, I regret those words today, but it sort of said.
We love CISO.
But it sort of said what was at the time, which is, no, I belong to this community. And so it was all about this community, community. The original sort of path for us, it's been a progression. The original path was find a job title. What's a job title that's changing and undergoing change? Or find like a new medium, like mobile apps that no one knows anything about, and try to serve it. Today, it's very much about an ecosystem, trying to bring an ecosystem together, and really trying to, sort of focus on verticals that, by and large, are undergoing some sort of change and disruption. The reason that we don't exist inside of a big show company, besides the fact that we tend to lose like a ton of money for a couple years, which big show companies really hate. And, I don't know, I put that in there, but no one laughs. I guess it's an association, more associations here. I don't have a good association humor, even though I've been here all day. I will try to do it better for next time, But part of it is that, we have a proverbial whiteboard of ideas, and literally one of them that sits there was from a dinner with 4 people. They were all in town for a show. They were sponsors of a show, and one of them said, I took my spend from $100,000 to $5,000, and I've been there for 10 years, as a big spender. And that was it. I was like, great, because that sounds like they are not fulfilling the needs of these people, and sometimes that's all it takes for us to want to get into a vertical.
So what would you say is unique about some of our approaches, marketing in particular? Quick story, when we acquired InsurTech Connect, I asked Jay to describe the team, and he didn't say anything about a marketing person. I said, what do you mean you don't have a marketing person? He said, we don't have a marketing person. My mind was blown. I've learned a lot now. So Jay, do share.
It's a true story. It was not probably the best words to say to someone that wants to buy something from you. It's fine, doesn't need a marketer. But I will say that in our model is fairly unique. So for us to be successful, from show 1 to about show 4, we have to 5x revenue. That's sort of like what we do and have to do if it's going to work. In that time, I think what people find or have found sort of interesting was that in a given show cycle, and we do 1 show per year, but for that 1 annual show, we will send marketing email-wise, maybe 15 emails, and that's it. And the other thing that we tend to do, which I've learned is different, is at scale. So Courtney runs our biggest show. It's 70% of our total portfolio today. And they're going to spend sub 1% on paid marketing. A show that starts out that's sort of subscale for us is probably 3 to 5%. And I'll go into a lot of that more, but it's just, we are not, it was always sort of everyone has, I shouldn't say everyone, let me hedge. Some of us have a little bit of the imposter syndrome. And, I remember people saying oh, your events have grown because you did all this online marketing. That was your past. And it was like, no, we actually, don't, so.
We don't. But what we do is we work with a lot of partners and we let them market for us. So Jay.
And as much as I shouldn't expound upon that, because it is truly one of the things that we think is the most vital, but to me, like the beauty of Apple is that no one here, I don't believe, has ever received a phone call from Apple saying, you need a new phone, we have a great new phone. You may have seen a billboard for it, but what do you get? You get hammered by their partners telling you that you need it. And so I think, you think about someone like Tesla even, they became a $1 trillion brand and they didn't have, right? They'd never run any paid marketing whatsoever. And so it's not that like marketing is necessarily bad, but you just can't market your way to like 50% growth or even double-digit growth.
The product has to be there. So Jay, why don't we do space straws?
What's a space straw? That wasn't on my question list, by the way.
You see what I'm dealing
Literally have never heard this term before. I think we were walking up and she goes, I'm going to ask you about space straws. And I'm like, okay.
He goes, so we don't do space straws. And it was really interesting to hear Fernando talking about that earlier today, because I feel like, Fernando, you guys are coming around to the point where Connectiv is. We don't do space straws. We launch our prospectus about a month after the event, maybe 2 months after the event, and we take all that time to talk about it and decide what worked, what didn't work, how do we want to price things. We don't sell booth space. We sell sponsorships, mostly, packages. So it's a really intense process that we go through, and no customer has ever signed up for the next year on site. That was something very hard for me to accept, but I'm now a total convert, and I understand the process and appreciate it.
And we are, and I should say this works for, I don't know if it'll work for everyone. Our events are very complicated. It is not just standard booths. It is a lot of packages. It is a lot of things together. It's a lot of activations. It's a lot of thought leadership. It's a lot of stuff. And what we have found, though, is that the people that we deal with, and you think about small companies to big, but from venture-backed startups to some of our biggest brands, they have two things in common, which is they are not ready to talk about the show now. What do they really want to do? They want to go back. They want to talk to the sales teams. They want to see what it did. And then they're going to figure out their budgets, and then they're going to come back to us. And I think about it sort of like a great trip. Like, if you've ever been back on a great trip, how many times did you book it before you left the vacation? Like, not often, right? That sounds more like a timeshare. Like the great vacation is something that it just grows in your mind. So if we deliver that experience, then, it's only they're going to tell themselves how great it was. And we're not going to like miss that moment of getting them. And the same thing is, if you have to grow by 5%, the answer is not raise prices 5%. The answer is you always are going to have certain things that have more value than others and more pricing power than others. And so that's why when Courtney talks about when we go back, we literally go back and spend like, it does terribly, like, it's painful. It really is. It's painful. This package, do we keep it? Yes, no. Price, same, no, lower it. Oh, let's go through bullet by bullet. Actually, you know what? Let's take out this bullet, and we're going to make this bullet an option next year. Like, it is just, it's exhaustive. But I do think it is important. And thank you for coming around to that, by the way.
Yes, I had no choice. So
I did not make it easy on her, by the way. She called me, and I'm sorry to stop you there, but she goes, I've been with you long enough, I can say this. You were an extremely difficult person. But not impossible.
So true.
Yeah.
So Jay, what kind of vendors does Connectiv use?
I would say we have a lot of the standard, right? You think about outside of, other thing to note, all of our events currently are hotel shows. So we, I shouldn't say all are, but they tend to all have a hotel room block that gets us the space. And as such, of course, the food and beverage is our biggest line item, but it's really the two others are the general contractor and our AV. I would say we've never tried a housing company. We have a registration vendor, but only for on-site. Every other single piece of technology has been ultimately homegrown. Registration, back-end event management, like you name it. We have an off-the-shelf app, but we've customized the crap out of it with APIs. We've built a whole bunch of smart badge technology that hopefully, I can bore people with later because it's been a pet project of mine. But I'd say the one thing about the vendor side, which is, and this is, again, I live in a very, sort of like a bubble of our own thinking, which can be good and it can be bad. But I'd say that a lot of the vendors, I would just, sort of urge them, how can they align more with the shows? Today, I truly believe, like we talked about earlier, that cost, but it's sponsorship cost. It's not the attendee cost. It's what's hurting us is our ability to innovate, because the cost structure doesn't, enable us to innovate. It doesn't enable our sponsors to innovate. And so I do worry that part of, this functional problem, we have a fundamental problem, is sort of embedded in some of that, sort of the GC and other costs that are there, where it's not. So what we would love is people who are partners, people who don't just take a checklist and come back to us, people that can accelerate, sort of our work, and not someone that feels like a vendor at the end of the day.
So can you describe our model in greater detail? How does the revenue break down?
No, I can't. Oh, sure, but fine. So of our events, I would say people tend to consider them convex. I don't even know if that's a word. Conference plus expo. They are, I'd say there are things that we just don't do. Like, I couldn't tell you what net square feet is of our show. I remember we were going to submit for one of these like awards.
Fastest 50.
And it was like, well, what is your net square feet? I was like, well, a fairly significant piece of our square footage is actually a logo slapped on something that is meant to draw people to a certain place. So much of what we do when we're thinking about our floor plans is, how do we get you to linger? How do we get you some place? And the sponsor that is spending really good money on this thing, I suspect it counts as square feet to them, but not at, sort of like the show. But yeah. Our models tend to be one or the other. They tend to either be sponsor-centric, and it edges ever so closely. And so I would say over time, it meets to 60-40, but it starts out closer to 70-30 or 75-25 in favor of sponsors. And then we have other shows that are almost the opposite. They start out as 70 for attendee and ticket sales, and they will slowly make their way, probably at scale. And what is at scale in our type of business, where there's no free, expo pass? So at scale is 5,000, 7,000 people. And I'd say, there it'll get to 50-50 or even, at the size of ITC, now at the 8,000-10,000 range, tips in favor ultimately of some of the sponsors again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it would be great for you to share, why do we hold our events in Las Vegas?
We don't have enough time for that one. But we have been committed to, I will say that the one thing that we hear every time is someone that says to us, please don't do it in Vegas again. And sorry, I know there's at least one person here from Vegas, including, like the Venetian as well. The Venetian. Sean, I'll make sure we say that. Did you go to the Ohio State University by chance? You did not, okay. So, when I think about for Vegas, it is basically the halfway point between the East Coast and the West Coast. I know for those of you that actually know geography, that's not true, but try getting a person on the West Coast. Try getting people on the West Coast to fly anything over 40 minutes. It doesn't seem to work. And we've always talked about that we want to be the distraction, the big challenge. And we, I forget, I guess it was Nora, it's like 40 weeks, forget that, and then Rick jokes, well, how do you think I stayed married? But, here, the challenge is that our biggest KPI is conversations. That's it. That's why we've built a lot of technology to try to track how are we doing on conversations. And, we believe, hard to A/B test this, but we believe that when you are sort of stuck in Vegas, you will have more conversations. You can't go back home, and and like that ultimately is sort of why it is you pay a very pretty penny for that. We all know, but ultimately we believe it is also a global destination.
So if someone said Connectiv Events represents the next generation of events, what would you say?
I would say I'm flattered, right? We, didn't start out to do anything except serve an audience. And I would say that is what we do today is just to continue to try and serve this audience. It is our North Star. If we aren't doing it for them and it's for us, because only we benefit, I think it's the wrong choice, and we don't do it.
Right. So this is a loaded question, obviously, but why did you hire a trade show veteran like myself when your events are so different? And has having
I better look at my notes and really get this one right. I spent time on this.
As a veteran,
Did not want to mess this one up. This was really important.
We've got a couple other veterans now too, but
true.
I was probably the first. So why did you do that, Jay?
Well, I think people have heard me say, it took me many years to realize that you're part of something that's not just the community you serve. And so by default, right, if you are someone who is producing an event, and everyone here knows this, you are part of an event, sort of community, and it's sort of like wearing two hats. And I would say it took us time, and longer than we, may have should have, is one way I could put it, to realize, sort of like that. And so I actually see it as an achievement that you would want to join us, because I think it means that we are doing both things correct. We are serving the audience, hopefully faithfully in a great way, and it hopefully means that we are being part of this other community. And so, I don't think we needed launch experts. What we really needed was company building experts. You can build great product by being pretty loosey-goosey, right? I don't think you can build scale that way and consistency. And if there's one thing that, sort of people with a lot of experience, and certainly you, Courtney, not just lumping people together, it's, right, you've brought a focus, sort of to us. We've always had passion, but you help, sort of really, I'd say, take us to the next level. So that's why. Thank you, Courtney. There you go.
Thank you, Jay.
Yeah.
Let's see. 20% of our company is comprised of technologists. Why is that? And is that something you'd recommend for other event organizers?
Well, I will say that I probably don't recommend it for those that have tried. It started out as an expensive hobby, but it was really born out of a belief. And for us, the belief is that technology was going to fundamentally alter how, sort of we engage in live, sort of experience. And that if we didn't find a way to use technology better, we were going to fail. The other thing that I think it was driven out of was, frankly, I hate, if I didn't make that clear enough. If we were writing this out in the email, I'd be with capital letters probably. I hate badge scanning. I think lead-style badge scanning is just the worst thing ever. No attendee ever said, yes, thank you, right? It purely exists for a one-sided relationship, and it makes the exhibit halls feel like used car lots. At the end of the day, right, what do people really want, right? They want to connect. But why should it only be let me scan you, versus why doesn't everyone be able to pick up a phone? And if they have a QR code, we each do it without this. Or if you have an app, how do we do it? So a lot of our work has been to try to create and facilitate connections, to replace what I believe are just outdated tactics that, again, the fact that people will charge exhibitors for badge scanners as a revenue thing, that to me, again, fundamentally means something's wrong with the show. That's a bad business model, because that means you're trying to monetize. I was talking to Dave, earlier, and he had said something about, right, the mission isn't monetization. Monetization is an outcome. And it's why we didn't talk about this before, but, we talk about ourselves a lot as a product company. And it's not, are you a conference or a trade show? We talk about it as a product company because at the end of the day, Geico is a great business, but the only reason Geico spends over $1 billion a year is that they know at some point in time, you're gonna need insurance, and they have to make sure they're top of mind, right? Same thing with Verizon, same thing with others, and yet, if you think about what I think about product companies, these are things you want to buy. So our mission is to try to make our show something people want to buy, not something we have to sell them on. Easier said than done, I understand, but it's a way of thinking. Yeah.
So do you think that the trade show industry should be evolving themselves more quickly?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask, truly. I actually think, if you don't come to events like these, and, I can't tell you the number of people who are similar to me. They were in a domain and they started a show, and they hear that you're going to a show for show people. They either say that's meta, or I don't get it, or something like that. And then what you realize, though, when you're here, is that this is just an outstanding community. Right? The people here are just phenomenal. We talk about ourselves not just as a product company, but as a service business. It's the first value of our company is we serve. And that's how I feel about everyone here, is that, listening to the associations. I wish I wrote so many of them down, because it was a hematology, there's kidneys and neurology, and There's so many, like the work that gets done here is truly changing lives. And so this is just an amazing place to be. So, I think if I sit up here and say, you need to evolve yourselves, it's kind of hypocritical. I think, it comes back to, and I don't know if it was maybe what Steve said about, instead, how do you change the internal mindset to allow yourself to try to change and get better? But I can't fault this industry.
Awesome.
I mean, if I needed, no, forget it.
Okay, so we wanted to leave 5 minutes for questions. But before we do that, I just want to let everybody know that in a couple of years, we're going to be selling Manifest. So if anybody in this audience is interested in buying it, we'd like to hear from you.
Well, that wonderful plug aside, I will make one other, which is, oh, sorry, Sam, I didn't mean to which is, I mean, we truly didn't come here to try to find buyers for shows. At the end of the day, being a for-profit company, if you build a big enough show, someone will buy it. I think what's really interesting for us is, we actually fought Sam. He wanted to call us the disruptor, the disruptor, the disruptor. And we're like, could we have something friendlier like innovator? Because, we'd much rather find ways to partner. Partnership is like our bread and butter. The thing that would be the most fun is saying, does our approach, does our way of thinking, can we help? Can we work with somebody else to all get better? That would be really fun for us.